It is my understanding, and this is with respect to money that was spent on an ambassadorial residence in Geneva. And it is my understanding that this matter first arose at a joint select committee of Parliament yesterday, where Senator Gopi Skoon raised an issue coming out of the Auditor General's report and the expenditure of what seems to be quite a large sum of money for a residence, somewhere in the region of, I believe, $26 million. And it being reported last night, unfortunately, and being spun last night as though that happened under this administration. In fact, the work was contracted and commenced, first of all, in January 2014. And what happened is that the initial budget mushroomed, ballooned, and went exponential up to that figure of $26 million. And this is on the ambassadorial residence in Geneva. And this all happened prior to September 2015. In fact, the award of the contract, the variations to the contract, the explosion of the contract to that sum of money. And it was finally completed under our tenure. So to try and link this at all to this administration, or worse yet, the current permanent representative of Trinidad and Tobago to the United Nations in Geneva, Ambassador Makeda Antoine, is plainly wrong, incorrect, and unfortunate. In fact, we had a very glowing report provided by our Minister of Labour this morning at Cabinet. She's just returned from Geneva, where she went to attend the ILO conference. And she was very pleased to report to the Cabinet that Ambassador Makeda Antoine is doing exceptionally well. She said that along with her colleagues, these are the ambassadorial colleagues in Geneva, Ambassador Antoine is receiving very good reports. She's very well respected and has already seemed to have built her reputation there. And we thank her, being a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, who's taken the effort and taken the opportunity to go out there and represent her. And we're quite pleased with that report that we received. I will also give you a quick update on something coming out of the Prime Minister's recent trip, official trip to visit to China. You all would have heard the Prime Minister tell us there were a number of initiatives that we were pursuing. One of those initiatives was with respect to Lake Asphalt. Another initiative was with respect to the construction of a state-of-the-art industrial park facility down in the Point Lisas area. Very soon following on the heels of that visit, which was only a couple of weeks ago we returned, there is a high-level delegation coming from Beijing. They're arriving in Trinidad and Tobago on Saturday, which is 2 days away, and we have planned a list of activities. This high-level group of politicians and businessmen from Beijing have been sent by the central government of China, and we're looking forward to greeting them. And this is just the first stage of the results and the implementation of decisions that we've taken, and what we hope to see, an influx of Chinese investment in some very significant projects in Trinidad and Tobago. So they arrive here on Saturday. They will be going down to Lake Asphalt on Sunday. They will then visit the site of the industrial park where Beijing Construction is being awarded the contract. They will then take a tour of Point Lisas facilities. On Monday, I'm sure by now you all would have been invited as members of the media. The Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, along with the Ministry of Trade, will be hosting the Chinese delegation, and we expect to sign 2 MOUs, one with respect to the industrial park and another MOU with respect to Lake Asphalt. And then we will have a press briefing there, and they go on to be hosted for a lunch at Stallmeyer's Castle before they go on to Tobago, because of course one of the areas we're looking for is growth in Tobago, and I'll come to the Sandals project in a short while. They will be hosted by the THA in Tobago, and then they return to China the next day. So it's a very short visit, but a lot is being achieved in that short space of time, and significantly after the return of the Prime Minister and his delegation from China a few weeks ago. Moving on to Sandals, and just to give an update, just before we went off on that official visit to China and then the working visit to Australia, we met, meaning the government's negotiation team and myself, with the executives from Sandals Resorts, and began the process now of trying to detail and move towards an implementation of agreements process with the Sandals project that we hope to build in Tobago. As you all are aware, MOU was signed in October last year between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and Sandals Resorts. This meeting that took place a few weeks ago was for us to plan a timetable as to how we will move towards the implementation of the project. We have completed all of the site surveys. The cadastral surveys have been completed, as well as the topographical surveys. Those are now in the hands of Sandals. Their architects, draftspersons, engineers, etc. are moving full speed ahead at implanting recent projects that they've had in Barbados and St. Lucia, and using those plans so we can shorten the time now for the landscape in Tobago. The Sandals executive team will be coming to Trinidad in the next couple of weeks. We expect them here at the beginning of July. We're working out the dates now, where our negotiation team, as well as the SPV we set up, the Golden Grove Buko Limited, I believe is the name of the company, where the chairman is Mr. Neil Wilson, and myself will be meeting with the Sandals executives and walking the site with them, etc., now starting to get into the nitty-gritty. A big part of this project, of course, and for the project to go ahead, is the environmental concerns that we're very aware of. We are in the process of hiring the right environmental engineers and persons who are experts in conservation and these types of things to ensure that everything is done properly and the applications are made to the Environmental Management Authority. Interestingly, many years ago, the EMA did in fact provide approval for the construction of a hotel and a resort on the exact site that we're going to. So we expect that this would assist the process. But also in our discussions from day one with the Sandals group, their engineers, and in particular the environmental people, we have told them how important it is that we maintain. And in fact, they told us that they have the type of technology now that they can actually help grow areas of the environment. They've been doing work in a number of other islands where they've been growing coral reefs, etc., etc. So we look forward to that happening. As it is determined and finalized, of course, we will inform you, the public, as to what is going on. The consultation process, which will play part of the application process for environmental approvals, all of these things will be taking place. But we are happy to announce that we are progressing with the Sandals project, as you would imagine, in a schematic and step-by-step process in accordance with the law and in accordance really with how these deals are negotiated. The last thing I'd like to touch on is with respect to the area of energy. You all would have been it would have been announced by the government, in particular the Prime Minister and the Minister of Energy, Senator Franklin Khan, sometime a couple months ago at our Energy Spotlight, that the government was embarking on a process and discussions with, in particular, BP and Shell with respect to LNG and really getting a proper value or deriving better value for money for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. At the time, there were a lot of naysayers, a lot of these people who like to call themselves experts, saying that we were actually running investment and foreign direct investment from Trinidad and Tobago. Well, as you now know, factually, that is completely incorrect. That was followed up with the Prime Minister leading a delegation before we went to Chogam in London might be a month ago now, where we met with the executives of BP and Shell, and those discussions went very well. You would recall that the Prime Minister announced that he is setting up an empowered negotiation team headed by Senator Khan as the Minister of Energy, myself, White and Case, an international firm of attorneys, Porton and Partners, Mr. Richard Beckles, a local attorney, the President of NGC, Mr. Mark Loquan, and then two of the Minister of Energy's advisors, Mr. Leroy Myers and Mr. Richard Jeremy. We have had our preliminary meetings, we meaning the government on behalf of that empowered team, on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, with our experts and our advisors. And I'm happy to announce that next week we kick off those discussions with BP and Shell. We've invited them for discussions next week Wednesday and next week Friday, where we will, along with our international advisors, sit across the table with the persons and executives from BP and Shell who are also authorized to make decisions and to conduct negotiations on their behalf. And those discussions commence next week, again, not so long after we first announced it. I'm happy to say that in meeting with our advisors, we feel very confident that there is a lot of positive for the people of Trinidad and Tobago to come. We feel very confident of our legal position. We feel very confident of our expert position with respect to gas, etc. And I'd just like to put on the table here, we will conduct business as this administration has been doing in a non-combative manner and in an amicable manner, sitting across the table from people who respect us, we respect them, and hopefully coming to a better deal and conclusion for the people of Trinidad and Tobago in the not too distant future. The test of that being, with a depleting asset and resource such as gas, we're going to get more value for money. The last thing on energy, I am hoping to go and lead a delegation to Venezuela in 2 weeks' time, I believe on the 27th of June. And once I've completed that, it would be myself, the executives from NGC, the executives from Shell, going to meet in Venezuela with the Venezuelan government and PDVSA. We are this close to finalizing the deal on the Dragon gas, and I hope that we will be able to announce in the next 2 weeks that we've completed this initiative and we are now going to get a cross-border gas. So that is also very close to completion. At this stage, I'd like to hand over to Minister Dillon for him to update you all on a few areas. Thank you.
Pleasant good afternoon to members of the media and to the listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to clarify issues pertinent to a broadcast that appeared last evening on TV6 with respect to covered vehicles and the contracts awarded to covered vehicles last evening. But let me first of all say that in all areas of police operations and law enforcement operations and even military type operations, there's always an element of operation in which personnel are out of uniform, i.e. plainclothes policemen, or even using unmarked vehicles. One must understand too that in those type of operations, they are very sensitive because of the ability to come out of uniform and use disguise to a large extent, but more importantly, to treat with unmarked vehicles and plainclothes is a sense to achieve a certain kind of operation. So they're a very sensitive operation insofar as national security is concerned. Now, with respect to the broadcast last evening, I want to make it quite clear that with respect to the awards of contracts to providers, it was done in a very professional manner and following all due processes. 5 providers submitted bids in response to the national security. They were evaluated by the procurement division of the national security, and recommendations were made to the National Security Council, who made the final decision with respect to the award of vehicles. Understanding that this is an area of very high security, because if this government is responsible for providing the resources for law enforcement to do the job effectively and efficiently. And it's in that vein that the government has provided the law enforcement the tools that's required to do so. So important it is that the contract was done with due process and to the extent where it was based on competitive bidding and at considerable cost to the government and people of Trinidad and Tobago. The award was given. The service providers right now they have delivered their vehicles. One provider is yet to deliver vehicles, and that provider has been given up to today to do so. Failing to do so, then action will be taken with respect to looking at other providers to supply those vehicles. But I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, and the country as a whole, that the process was done with due process and also through competitive bidding that allowed the government to ensure that law enforcement, in particular, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, receive the kind of support that's required to do their job effectively and efficiently. I also want to emphasize again that these are areas of national security that must not be compromised as far as reporting is concerned. They are very sensitive areas when we put people out of uniform and plain clothes, when we put people out of marked vehicles into unmarked vehicles. So I ask again that we, in terms of our reporting, we do so understanding the nature of security.
Thank you all very much. Just to add one thing to what Minister Dillon has said and to emphasize it, at the National Security Council, I think we can say without fear of contradiction, the analysis of the contracts that were awarded, as Minister Dillon said recently, has netted significant savings, I believe in the millions of dollars compared to what we came in and found as an administration. And we are certain, because what we looked at was the prices, we beat the prices down and got value for money. At this stage, we'll take any questions that you all have.
Fane Richards from TV6. In acknowledging that at least one of the service providers has not yet delivered vehicles, is there going to be any breach of contract, final penalty levied against them? That's question number one. And number two, was due diligence done not just in terms of trying to net savings in the execution of this contract, but to ensure that the providers had the expertise and the actual vehicles to be able to furnish national security with the vehicular needs that you all quantified?
To answer your first question, today was the deadline given to that service provider to provide the vehicles that were allowed in the contract. Failing so, actions will be taken against that provider today. The other, with respect to your other questions, yes, the due diligence was done with respect to the service providers. Background checks were done by the Tobago Police Service. Checks with respect to their finances and so on were done.
So why were the contracts given to companies that did not have the full complement of vehicles that you required?
I don't think it's a question of weren't given to them. The companies were given an allotment of vehicles to provide, and therefore they are the ones that should come up with the amount of vehicles that's required. This particular company wasn't able to meet the allotment and had asked for additional time, and they were given additional time by the procurement department of the Ministry of National Security. In fact, they were given a 1-week deadline.
How has the inability of at least that particular contractor to provide the full number of vehicles in any way affected these sensitive covert operations that you've talked about?
The operation is still ongoing, and the vehicles have been provided by the other providers. So there are vehicles that have been provided, and the operations are going.
So there's no current shortfall?
Minister, maybe you could give us any further updates coming out of the tour that you and the Commissioner of Police and the Chief of Defense Staff did yesterday with that particular area, I think in Beetham, where you had the concerns about a possible gang war. Any further strategies or discussions coming out of that development?
Most definitely. And let me say that the walk in the Beetham and Laventille area yesterday came out of a meeting that I held with the divisional commanders about 2 weeks ago. I called in the divisional commanders in 4 areas, the areas that, in fact, produced the largest amount of murders at this point in time. At that time, it was Western, Northern, Central, and Southern divisions. In that meeting, we looked at strategies to treat with the increase in murder, and Port of Spain, I might say. I forget, Port of Spain was a part of that meeting. We looked at areas and strategies to treat with the increasing murder rate in those divisions. Having had a discussion with the divisional commanders, I said to them, I will be walking around to all of those divisions to get a sense for myself on the ground, to hear both from law enforcement and the people within the community as to what are the challenges and what are the issues coming from the community side, but also coming from law enforcement side. So that the walkabout yesterday in the Laventille area had to do with, as an outcome of that very meeting. At that meeting at that walkabout I had with me the Commissioner of Police, the Chief of Defense Staff, and the MP for the area. We engaged several members of the community, and we did it against the background that there were several killings within the area, within recent times. We found that there were a number of issues within the area itself that allowed me as Minister of National Security when we got the type of feedback from the residents themselves and from law enforcement, we believe that there must be 2 types of interventions in the various communities, 2 strong interventions. One from a very law enforcement side, heavy law enforcement side, that is the Tobago Police Service and Tobago Defense Force. And also there's another intervention that has to be done in terms of more community type intervention. There is an area inside those communities that speaks to 2 types of gangs. One gang referred to as the Muslim gang and one as the Rasta gang. Now we believe in talking to those communities that these are labels that gangs are giving themselves. The Muslim gang and the Rasta gang. And I can tell you that the elements of national security, the law enforcement aspect, will be very much strengthened in those areas to treat with those issues of gangs and gang-related offenses. The whole issue revealed itself that there's retaliation between one gang to the next, claiming territories that don't belong to themselves. When questioned some of the young men in the area as to what is the reason for this, none of them can give you a reason whatsoever. So there's a lot of senseless killing taking place in our country. Senseless to the extent where even bystanders, people who don't belong to any gangs or whatsoever, are being caught in crossfire. And therefore, from the Ministry of National Security and from me as Minister of National Security, there will be a very strong law enforcement presence in those areas. You will see an increase in operations, an increase in presence by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, supported by the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, in those very areas, to give the people who don't belong to these gangs a sense of security and safety, but also to treat those members who belong to those gangs. People who take up illegal arms in this country did not take it up to play cricket, as I normally say, but to carry out some kind of illegal offense. And therefore, law enforcement must be hard on these people who are bent on destroying those very communities which they grow up, which they live. So there will be a heavy law enforcement approach to treat those elements who continue to disrupt our societies and our communities by bearing illegal arms. And reach a stage where there's almost random shootings, not even targeted to what they may call the so-called gang members. So there will be a response, and there will be a continued response and a sustained response from members of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and members of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force. Now understand that we already have a presence in the Laventille area. We had set up the Sugrim patrol base some time ago with a joint Army police presence. We have done so also in Enterprise. And what we have felt, what we have seen based on that presence, we saw a reduction in activities in the Sugrim Grace area. We saw a reduction in activities in the Enterprise area. So that we're going to do the same in those very communities. We're going to ensure that there's a greater contribution by members of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, in particular the Trinidad and Tobago Army, in support of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Because, as I said, we believe that we have to and we must ensure that those who are bent on bearing illegal arms in Trinidad and Tobago will face the full brunt of the agencies of national security. There has also been a sustained drive by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to recover arms and ammunition off the streets. Last year, you recall that we recovered 1,064 arms, which was the highest so far. To date, we have recovered almost close to 500 arms off the street and about 5,000 rounds of ammunition. Last year, we recovered almost 18,000 rounds of ammunition off the streets of Trinidad and Tobago. So there's also a gun retrieval strategy that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is operating with right now. And arms and ammunition, of course, retrieval strategy. We'll continue to press both in terms of that, but also we're looking at preventing these illegal arms from coming into our country in a number of different ways. So we'll continue to have the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard on our maritime borders and maritime waters. And we have, in fact, also established and continue to use what we call land-based coastal patrols, which is a joint patrol also, using members of Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force in land-based patrol areas, coordinating with the maritime side. So we have those patrols in the rural areas, in Icacos, in Chatham, in Losiro, in Quinam, in Moruga, in Galeota, in Toko, in Paria, in Blanchishes, and to some extent on our west coast between Embarcadero and Claxton Bay, along that train line area. So that we are using those initiatives to prevent as much as possible the influx of arms, illegal arms into our country. Within recent time, you've seen the government, in partnering with the United States, commissioned the scanners at the Point Lisa Port. We're hoping they're also working right now on the Port of Spain port with respect to vehicle scanners. That will allow us to prevent illegal arms and ammunition coming through by way of the ports, through containers, etc. So we're also looking at doing the same at the Port of Spain. So I'm putting all that in the context in terms of the joint effort to look at our borders, the penetration of our borders, and also to treat the issues as what exists in Trinidad and Tobago at this point in time. So the combination of initiatives that will be taking place to treat the question of illegal arms and also at the same time targeting the gangs within Trinidad and Tobago.
And the chairman of National Security Council, the Honorable Prime Minister, has asked for a meeting of the National Security Council on Monday, where this is one of the issues that the heads of the national security agencies will be coming to discuss with the National Security Council. So at the central government level, we are providing the support to Minister Dillon and the Ministry of National Security at the National Security Council, where we expect them to come and tell us how it is they intend to carry out the policy directions and initiatives of the Ministry of National Security.
Minister, can you say that the anti-gang bill, has it reaped any benefits for us? Were you all able to arrest any gang members so far?
It will reap benefit, I can say it quite categorically, it will reap benefit, and that is straight from the Commissioner of Police in his response. It will reap benefits. As a matter of fact, even before the bill was proclaimed, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service had started discussion with the Director of Public Prosecution to look at lessons learned from the last time we had the anti-gang bill in place, and they have seen several people were able to go to the courts and get reprieve. So we've learned lessons from that. So the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service had discussion with the Director of Public Prosecution in how to implement measures with respect to the Act. Additionally, they have trained members of the organized crime and intelligence unit to treat with issues which pertain to gangs and gangs-related offenses in Trinidad and Tobago.
Minister, are you saying that no gang member has been arrested since the bill was assigned?
Well, it's not only arrested, it's arrested and charged under the anti-gang legislation.
Gang members have been arrested, well, and let me put it this way, people have been arrested, but under the Anti-Gang Act. As far as I'm aware, and
again, these are some of the questions we will be asking the police service when we meet with them on Monday, because we have the same questions as you all. Central government is not the arresting body. We are not the ones who go out there. So part of the discussion we expect to take place with National Security Council on Monday is getting the answers to exactly the question you've just asked.
Outside of the arrest, the other feature of this legislation is the disruptive element. If we haven't seen arrests and prosecutions, arrest charging prosecutions as yet, from an operational point of view, is there the sense that since the bill has been proclaimed, that and the law enforcement has gotten these of this additional strength, that there has been a disruption of gang activities? Is there any evidence?
There are continued operations with respect to disruptions of elements of gangs or criminal activities throughout Trinidad and Tobago, and that's ongoing operations that's undertaken by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service.
You're saying that it will reap benefits. Is it that you don't have a sense of the time frame because you need to ask the police what are the missing links at this point that have prevented it from resulting in a charge?
The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is the executing agency in terms of law enforcement, and I can't set a time frame for them. I can give them what I believe should happen. And this is what I do, at least from a policy and strategic standpoint. So I give them my expectation as to what and when it should happen. But at the end of the day, they are the executing agent. They are the ones that's charged to execute and implement with respect to the Act.
Minister, there were claims in today's Guardian with regards to Mr. Keegan Rupchan, who claimed that the carnival plot was a scripted hoax. He was given to recite by Jordanian security officers. Can you share any light on that?
I can answer that question because it has a specific legal angle and implication with respect to it. So as you know, we had come to the population during the carnival period and we had alerted the population to a serious threat, a terrorism threat, and in fact carried out a number of operations, meaning our law enforcement carried out a number of operations. It is important and it's critical to note that that information came from our partners, international intelligence agencies, both the Jordanians and other allies of Trinidad and Tobago. We find it very interesting, and we will also be discussing this. We find it very interesting. You use the word script. I mean, let's be honest here. We are now seeing a script being recited by Mr. Rupchan and others. It plays no part of what is taking place with the ongoing investigations from the part of deterring law enforcement from doing what it has to do. In fact, Minister Dillon has been along with my assistants from the legal perspective, meeting with our heads of law enforcement to ensure that we're putting in place proper measures. You would have seen in our working trip to Australia recently, I met with the law enforcement agencies who deal with terrorism, and they shared information with us as well as legislation, as well as how they deal with it. This is not surprising at all. We can see past it. It is a script that they're using to describe, to try and put distance between themselves. It does not deter us from doing what needs to be done, but I can tell you, including when I went to London for the CHOGM and met with intelligence agencies in London and anti-terrorism agencies in London, what took place at Carnival was very real intelligence. In fact, when we were doing the operations, we built it out. We've had some things take place very recently, last week, with some heavy arm and ammunition finds in certain places. This is part of the real narrative. So persons, as you would expect, who are accused of certain things will want to tell a side of the story, and in particular, their side of the story. That is being analyzed. It is being noted. It is not surprising. I can tell you when Mr. Rupchan came back to Trinidad and Tobago as part of the process of counterterrorism, persons who are returning and there are question marks over them, they are detained and they are interviewed and questioned. And I can tell you at that stage he chose to say nothing. So it is not surprising now, 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, he has a long statement and a long script that we have concerns about, or we look at with a level of skepticism. But there is an ongoing and continuing investigation, part of which continues to be the whole monitoring of persons who their concerns with respect to.
Minister Young, are you going to contact the Jordanian security officials across there to verify what he said was
what you can be assured? What you can be assured of is our law enforcement agencies and our international partners are very responsible persons, and they don't run off behind everything that is thrown in front of them. Do not for a moment think that we have not already done what you've just described, not us, the government, but our law enforcement agencies, and that an investigation is taking place, the building of a file, the building of evidence, etc., etc. As I say, persons are entitled to say what they want. The time will come when they will have to face what needs to happen.
At the meeting of the NSC on Monday, will that same matter involving the seizure of those arms that must be discussed as well?
One of the areas we will be discussing on Monday is getting an update as to what is going on the front of what took place at Carnival, because as I say, it's an ongoing investigation, etc. And the law enforcement would usually provide us with an update as to what has taken place. It is an ongoing investigation. I'm sure that will feature as part of the discussion.
What is causing the delay with the modification of the Galleon passage? It has been in Cuba for almost 3 weeks now, and we are hearing no word from NITCO. There is a sitting of the Senate taking place right now, so the Minister of Works and Transport could not be here. And as he was getting up to run off to the Senate, I asked him that question. I don't have the specifics as to what is happening. I know NITCO is the agency that is in charge of it and supposed to be monitoring it. A decision had been taken to cut out some of the additional works that were supposed to be done in Cuba, because we want the vessel here servicing the sea bridge passage as quickly as possible. So, for example, the building of a shelter over the passenger deck on the top floor and additional bathrooms. We said, look, that can be done in Trinidad and Tobago. Get the vessel here. What it was really going to Cuba for is to ensure that the area where the motor vehicles and the trucks, etc., were going to be transported had proper coverage, because when we bought it, it was an open area and we wanted to have that properly covered. And I suspect that is the work that is taking place here. The Cabinet has instructed NITCO to ensure that the vessel is brought here as quickly as possible, as soon as that particular work is done. I don't have the specifics as to what else is taking place. I've read in the media, they say that it is still in Cuba. I am hoping it is still in Cuba because they're completing that work, and then the vessel will return, well not return, will arrive in Trinidad and Tobago and begin to service our sea bridge. I have no personal idea, and I was not able to get that information from the Minister of Works and Transport. But I think you all can address those questions to NITCO, who are the agency in charge.
Has Cabinet received any proposals from INCAT or Hostal the new fast ferries?
The answer is yes. In fact, I'll say it here because I haven't even been able to tell the Prime Minister. He knows that we've received the first proposal from Hostal. As you all are aware, there was an Hostal team here on a separate mission last week or the week before, where they came and they inspected the 4 water taxis that are Hostal vessels. They also inspected the 6 fast patrol vessels which are with the Coast Guard, and they also went to see what are the type of dry docking facilities, because all of those 10 vessels need work to be done from a maintenance point of view, and some of them to get them seaworthy again, in particular the Coast Guard vessels. During the time that they were here, we received from Australia a comprehensive proposal from Hostal for the provision of the fast ferries that the Prime Minister spoke about on his return, as well as a Cape grade vessel, which is a military naval vessel for the patrolling of the coastline of Trinidad and Tobago. INCAT has this morning, in fact at 2:30 this morning, sent through to us, because of course Australia is 14 hours ahead, sent through to us their proposal. Cabinet is setting up a committee to evaluate these 2 proposals, and I've told both Hostal and INCAT that we would like to invite them to Trinidad and Tobago within the next week or 2, probably in 2 weeks' time, after the evaluation committees have gone over their proposals, to meet with our evaluation committees and to go through the process, because we want to proceed with those vessels as quickly as possible.
The Cape grade vessel, because most people don't seem to know much about this type of vessel. Is this an OPV or it's not?
I actually witnessed it. We went on it. It is, if I remember correctly, it is 58 meters in length. It is a newer version of what used to exist before. The Australian Navy use it on the north coast and the east coast of Australia. They have issues to their north coast of immigrants coming down from, for example, Indonesia, etc. The waters there are rougher than the waters as you would expect between Trinidad and Tobago. So it is a vessel that can be built to spec. You know, of course, there's a shell, etc., but you can build on it as you like. They're not the long-range OPVs. So those vessels actually go out in Australia for 28 days before they come back in for routine maintenance, etc. They can stay out for as long as 30 days, and that is the area that they patrol. On the particular vessels, we saw they were holding bays, etc., because, of course, if they pick up illegal immigrants, but they were telling us that it can be spec'd to suit, for example, with guns and those types of things. But they are performing particularly well from the research we've done, and that is the type of area that they're searching.
It doesn't have helicopter capability.
No, it is only a 58 meter, so this one does not have helicopter capabilities.
The argument could be made from certain quarters that the government is looking at resurrecting an OPV type initiative.
Let me tell you something, and I'm sure Minister Dillon, who is a former CDS, he could share his own view. Personally, as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, I think if we had those OPV vessels when they were purchased, and actually they are now a major part of the Brazilian Navy. We have our CDS going down to Brazil to deliver a paper, I think, at the end of this month, and one of the things we've asked him to do is go and see the vessels with the Brazilian Navy. I personally believe, as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, if we had those two OPV vessels, we would not be having the type of difficulties we're currently having with the infiltration of illegal arms and ammunition in Trinidad and Tobago, because those vessels were built for spec. Those vessels had both interceptor capabilities, i.e. fast boats that could have been dropped to intercept, as well as the ability for helicopter services, which would have taken us beyond our borders. The fact is, and this is not politics, the fact is our borders were left very porous, unmanned for 5 years, and it was only at the end of the 5-year term of the former administration that they rushed off and bought Damon vessels. Next time they raise it, ask them when those vessels were actually delivered to Trinidad and Tobago. It wasn't 2010, it wasn't 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. It was towards the end when we came in as an administration in 2015. So what happened between the years 2010 and 2015, where there was this proliferation of arms and ammunition into the borders of Trinidad and Tobago? So the Cape grade vessel is not an OPV from the point of view. It doesn't have that helicopter capability, etc. It's only a 58-meter vessel.
Second Can you share a little more information with regard to the Chinese delegation who will be here, who will be heading that team, how long they will be staying, and how many members will be coming to our show?
I'm going from memory here. It is the deputy mayor of Beijing heading the delegation. So in China, that is a very, very high position. They have their municipal governments, not like how we have corporations. It's 1.4 billion people you're talking about. And then you have your central government. So he is being sent by central government, and by Beijing is the deputy mayor and a number of support staff, as well as executives from certain companies. I can't remember the name. I mean, Beijing Construction must be one of them. There are also companies there that are interested in asphalt. And my recollection of the size of the delegation, and don't hold me to this, I believe is between 6 and 8 persons coming. They are arriving here on Saturday evening. We have, as I told you, a full schedule for them on Sunday, a full schedule on Monday. I believe they leave on the Tuesday. At latest, they leave first thing on Wednesday. It might be late on Tuesday night.
So they were invited here by our government?
Correct. When we went out, there's a delegation. We extended invitations across the board to many.
Putting their bill.
We will, of course, as happened, for example, when the Prime Minister and his delegation went to China, they footed the bill for some of the delegation. We will definitely be providing the logistics, etc. I actually don't think, but I could be wrong here, that we are footing the bill for their accommodation, etc. I think they've made those arrangements on their own. But we will provide transport. We'll make sure they're properly secured, and the things like the lunch, etc., and the signing ceremonies. Obviously, we foot the bill for those types of things.
Cost that you could tell us with respect to for Beijing construction and the industrial park? Was there a cost to that particular project at a time frame?
Yes, there is. My recollection of the decision at Cabinet, it is somewhere in the region of $104 million US. We had actually negotiated it down and saved, I think, upwards of 35 million, if not 40 million US. And we have asked that it be constructed and completed within, I think, 12 months, a maximum of 18 months. We also negotiated that I believe up to 50% of the content, construction content, must be local. And I believe maybe upwards of 60% of the labor force to be used must be local. And part of the benefit of this contract is they are guaranteeing 10 large Chinese firms as the startup tenants for this industrial park. So part of what we're hoping is that they'll bring manufacturers and other distributors for this area of the world, because this, what we've sold Trinidad and Tobago as, is a continuation of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is President Xi Jinping taking stuff from China all the way to England, along the old Silk Road, and we've told them, don't stop in England, come across the Atlantic, down to Trinidad and Tobago. Let us be a launching point into South and Central America.
And so you'll get all the necessary approval for the Sandals project. When are you likely to turn the sod for that project? I
will be better prepared to tell you that in the middle of July when we meet with them, because what we've looked at now is an outline and a dateline of when we need certain things to be done. Obviously, I would love to be able to turn it as soon as possible, have the government turn it as soon as possible. But let's wait until July when we have those discussions and we really get down to the nitty-gritty. All right?
I just wanted to ask as well, a different issue here. Earlier this week, you had a group of religious leaders who said that they would send a particular correspondence to the Attorney General regarding the Equal Opportunities Act, lesbian gay rights, and that sort of thing, and the Marriage Act as well. I mean, we all know the issues, but was there any, at today's meeting, did the AG brief at all? Did he say whether he received correspondence from them at all?
I wasn't even aware that was to be sent to the Attorney General. I actually thought it was going to be sent to the government and the Prime Minister. The answer is no. That did not feature at all in today's Cabinet discussion, and the Attorney General has not told us anything with respect to it. Okay, thank you very much, members of the media. We appreciate your time as usual.